Hello, welcome back to the Potsmoker's Bible. My name is Zion. I'm the author of the Potsmoker's Bible, which contains the prophetic book of Zion, where I get my name and authority. It comes from the Ketuvim, or Old Testament, of the Christian Bible. I use the King James Version of the Bible in order to put together the prophecy of Israel from the scattered bits and pieces of the testimony of the various prophets of the Old Testament. And what I came up with was a book called the Book of Zion, and it foretells the events of the year 2020. Very prophetic. And I am reading to you today from the 21st chapter of the Potsmoker's Bible, which contains the 18th chapter of the Book of Zion. And I'm going to take up where I left off before I did all the readings. So I'm going back to the 18th chapter of the Book of Zion and the 21st chapter of the Potsmoker's Bible. And I'm beginning the dissertation, which starts with Jeremiah 14:19, which becomes Zion 18:1. Hath thou utterly rejected Judea? Hath thy soul loathed Zion? Why hast thou smitten us, and there is no healing for us? We look for peace, and there is no good, and for a time of healing, and behold, trouble. Jeremiah asks God if they have cast off Israel, both Judea and Zion. We wonder if God has truly turned away. Israel is an embattled nation with enemies on every side. Zion is a mystery. But the world is in chaos. There is no peace. We all suffer from health issues. Trouble and scandal rule today. How very true. It seems as though God himself hates the drug users. We have no hope. We are backed into a corner. We wonder why we are made to suffer. Even we, in our moments of stress, wonder at the cruelty of man and at the absence of God. We have been suffering for our election as Zionites for 80 years now. In biblical terms, that is the equivalent of 2 generations. The hardships caused by the prohibition has escalated. The first generation was subjected to jail, prison, deportation, and fines. Now we are robbed, our children taken from us, we're gunned down in the streets. We suffer because we found God. And that is the most crucial point of the prophecy. We, the pot smokers of the world, found God. We got turned on genetically. We became a higher form of humanity. We, who are able to have telepathic communications, we can hear the voices of the gray. We can use our higher brain functions. We alone of all humanity know God on a personal level, 1-to-1. That is the truth of the prophecy. Pot smokers find God on high, using God's abilities to speak. We were created in God's image. The tree of life was forbidden from the human race. That tree of life is what makes us like God, because we evolve into our true form. We become as God. We know that we are eternal beings, that transmutes from one body to another. We have become like God, having found our way to the tree of life, marijuana. When I first realized that my pot plant was the teraphim and therefore a tree, I realized that it was the tree of life from Scripture. It became sacred to me, and the high changed. I became holy. I began to walk a sacred path where everything became holy. I became a priestess. I cannot smoke marijuana without God present, and I do not ever plan on living without the presence of God. A Christian goes to church every Sunday. They get all dressed up and show the world that they belong to Jesus, their God. I smoke marijuana and speak to a living God that responds to my voice. Pot equals God. God equals gray. Gray equals ancient blue-skinned alien gods. That is what I believe. So to my way of worshiping my God, I get high. I cannot, will not give up my truth. Pot allows me and my people to speak to the aliens one-on-one. Psalms 79:11 becomes Zion 18:2. Let the sighing of the prisoners come before thee. According to the greatness of thy power, preserve thou those that are appointed to die. Please, Gray, who are God, listen to the sighing of the prisoners. Witness their suffering. Feel the separation imposed upon us by the state. The worst part of prison is our separation from God. When we go into prison, our level of THC declines until it bottoms out. At that point, our link is reversed, is severed, and we can no longer communicate directly, and we can sigh. That's all that they hear, the silence of our sighing. This separation is perhaps what the government intends. The only way to prevent the arrival of the gray is to prevent gray humans from connecting to the gray through marijuana. Once a person turns on their gray DNA, the only way to prevent connection is to prevent pot use. The base human society that believes in false gods and their right to use the earth however they like at the expense of the poor do not want the gray alien god of our ancient past to land in front of the world's eyes. They are doing everything that they can to prevent it because they will have to give up their money and their power base, their base society. But it's not the gray that are the ones to blame for our suffering. We, the children of the gray, have rejected our creators. We have turned away from God, and in so doing, we have rejected the true God. So they, the gray, wait to give us aid. Psalms 68:5 and 6 becomes Zion 18:3 and 4. A father to the fatherless, a judge of the widows is God in his holy habitation. God setteth the solitary in families. He bringeth out those which are bound in chains. But the rebellious dwell in a dry land. Psalm 68:5 and 6 says that the gray are the judges. They are the true authority on earth. They have prior ownership claim to this planet. They may have existed in mass. They may have exited in mass 3,000 years ago, but they never gave up their rights of rulership and parentage of humanity. They have the right to be the judges of earth. When the gray first came to earth, their entire civilization came here. They were a wandering species looking for a planet that could sustain them. They negotiated a deal with our human ancestors, our Neanderthal ancestors, to co-own this world. But humanity so threatened the Neanderthals that they chose to move to a different world that was found, one that they, but not the gray, could live on. At that point, the gray became the sole rulers of the earth. Humanity was far too primitive to rule, being violent and chaotic in their primitive nature. Because the gray are our parents, we will always be subject to their authority. That is until we grow up enough to be sent out on our own, so to speak. But we, who are the children, can't decide if we are old and wise enough to be our own judges. So we as children are under the authority of our parents. The gray represent both parents having contact with our mother race. So the gray are the judges. They have already judged the case. They have already ruled in favor of their gray children, who, by the way, are the fatherless and the single mothers, the widows of this society. The death of the family unit makes every single mother a widow of the youth war on drugs. The judge has ruled. We, who use drugs, are in the right. When the Grey arrive to enact their prophecy, they will end the oppression. They will release the prisoners. They will set the solitary in families. The arrival of the Grey in response to the call of the Zionite people will fulfill the prophecy. I plan on reuniting families, not in a traditional sense, but in a way to have parents live with or as near as possible to their offspring. When our housing guild places people, they will place mothers and fathers in the same home as the children they share. Family must always be a priority. When we are safe and free in Zion, our enemy will be suffering the effects of global warming and climate change. It is projected that the breadbasket of the world will become a desert, a dry land. And when the aquifer is depleted, it will become very dry. So the rebellious will live in a dry land. Isaiah 41:17 becomes Zion 18:5. When the poor and the needy seek water, and there is none, and their tongue faileth for thirst, I, the Lord, will hear them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. Isaiah is one of those, Isaiah 41:17 is one of those timeline passages. It pinpoints the unique events of the time when this all happens, when the earth becomes so polluted by the greed of society that the people can no longer find clean water to drink, when the people can't afford to buy water that has been purified, it will not be able and will not be able to find safe water to drink. That has been happening now for many years. So this is the time of prophecy, when the water is when we are forced to buy our water and wood. The God of Israel will not forsake the poor. God will not forsake Israel. God will not forsake Zion. God will not turn a deaf mind to the suffering of the grays or the humans. They may not be able to hear the thoughts of humans, but they still care deeply for them. The true living God of Israel will not forsake humanity. Psalms 103:6, Zion 18:6. The Lord executeth righteousness and judgment for all that are oppressed. The gray execute righteousness and judgment for all the oppressed. This means that God is and has always been the God that hates oppression. And as such, anyone, and indeed everyone who is subject to oppression can count on the gray for assistance. That being said, the gray are our architects of history, and they have given aid to other oppressed peoples in our history. Our history is full of dictatorships and empires that have been undermined by those oppressed, and the oppressed have always overcome their oppressors in time. So the oppression of Zion is just one more attempt by the greedy to overpower and control those seen as being without help. But we do have help. We have 12 entire species of aliens headed by our little gray friends. Those little gray friends will give us the sense of right we need to overcome our desire for peace and to overcome our enemies and to obtain our sense of right that we need to overcome our desire for peace and to help ourselves overcome our fear. So may the gray watch over you, guide you, protect you, and keep you from harm. May they teach you right from wrong, and may you be and may you be worthy of them. May your thoughts, words, and deeds reflect truth, good, and light, the unicorn way. Find your joy and pursue it, and make that your guilt choice. Stay happy and high if you use drugs. You have every right and reason to. Believe me, I know. I wrote the books. So I'm going to say later now. because I love you way too much to ever say goodbye.